Rivar woke to the sensation of weightlessness, his body suspended in an eerie, glowing azure chamber. His head throbbed, and his limbs felt sluggish, as though he had been sedated, blinking against the unnatural luminescence. He struggled to make sense of his surroundings. The transparent walls pulsed with energy, their surfaces shifting like liquid glass. Strange symbols hovered in the air, flickering between colors his brain failed to comprehend. The air was thick with an unfamiliar scent, sweet, metallic, and infused with something that made his skin tingle. Panic surged through him as he attempted to move, but invisible restraints held him in place. His breath quickened. The last thing he remembered was walking home after a late shift at work. The streets had been deserted, the night unervingly silent. Then, a blinding light, a deafening hum, and nothingness. Now he was here, wherever here was. A sudden hiss filled the chamber. The walls shimmered and then dissolved, releasing him without warning. His legs buckled, and he collapsed onto a floor that was strangely soft despite its metallic sheen. Before he could gather his bearings, figures emerged from the light. They were not human. Tall, slender beings with iridescent skin glided toward him, their elongated eyes radiating an unnatural glow. Their features were both mesmerizing and unsettling, possessing a beauty that defied nature. Their garments were sleek, woven from a material that shifted like liquid metal. They moved with an unnerving precision, not walking but floating with an effortless grace. One of them stepped forward, taller than the rest, their posture exuding authority. Their gaze locked onto Rivar, and without speaking, he felt their voice vibrate within his skull. The subject is conscious. He is adapting well to the atmospheric shift. Rivar recoiled. The words had not been spoken aloud. They had appeared directly in his mind, as though his thoughts had been hijacked. His heart pounded. "Who? What? Where am I?" he rasped, his voice hoarse. The tall figure tilted their head, studying him with something between curiosity and amusement. The others remained motionless, their glowing eyes unblinking. "You are in the Zafari sovereign domain. Your presence here is an honor." Rivar's mind reeled. Zafari sovereign domain? None of it made sense. He pushed himself up onto his hands and knees, his body still sluggish from whatever they had done to him. "I didn't agree to be here. Send me back. Now." The figures exchanged glances, though their expressions were unreadable. Too alien, too perfect to interpret. "Your presence has already been decreed by the High Sovereign. Your consent is not required." A chill crept down Rivar's spine. He barely had time to process the words before an unseen force lifted him off the ground. He struggled, but it was futile. His body refused to obey. The air itself held him in place, as though he were bound by invisible chains. He was levitating, completely immobilized. A doorway materialized ahead, its edges outlined by shifting patterns of gold and violet light. Beyond it, a vast corridor stretched into the unknown, lined with towering pillars that pulsed with energy. The Zafari led him forward, their movements fluid and unerring. Rivar's mind screamed at him to fight, to resist, but he was utterly powerless. As they navigated the labyrinthine corridors, glimpses of impossible landscapes unfolded through the transparent walls. Floating islands suspended in a sea of shimmering mist, rivers of liquid light cascading through the air, structures that seemed to grow rather than be constructed. Then they turned a corner, and suddenly the space opened into a massive chamber, a throne room, but unlike anything he had ever imagined. The ceiling arched impossibly high, composed of material that reflected an entire galaxy, stars swirling as it contained within. The walls pulsed with life, veins of luminous energy leading to a throne carved from a crystalline substance that shifted between shades of violet and sapphire. And seated upon it was her. The moment Rivar saw her, something deep in his gut twisted. The woman, or rather, the queen, was unlike the others. Her presence was overwhelming, her aura commanding. Her iridescent silver-blue skin shimmered, as though woven with the very stars above. Long, flowing hair cascaded behind her, strands drifting as if carried by an unseen current. Her eyes, deep violet flecked with gold, pierced into him with intensity that sent a shiver through his body. She was breathtaking, terrifyingly so. When their eyes met, A strange sensation gripped Rivar. A pull, as if gravity itself bent toward her. The guards released him, and he collapsed on the floor, gasping. His limbs were finally his own again, but he dared not move. The queen stood. The room seemed to react to her motion, the walls pulsing in sync with her breath. She descended from the throne with deliberate grace, each step soundless. When she finally halted before him, silence swallowed the chamber. Then she spoke. Her voice was not just heard. It echoed within his soul. Rivar of Earth, you've been chosen. His throat was dry. Chosen for what? Her lips curved, not quite a smile, but something close. For a most vital purpose. Rivar's pulse pounded as he stared up at the alien queen, his mind scrambling to make sense of it all. Chosen? Vital purpose? He had been abducted, stripped of control, and now stood before a ruler who regarded him as though his fate had already been sealed. The queen's piercing gaze remained fixed on him, scrutinizing his every reaction. He wanted to look away, but something about her presence made it impossible. It was more than just her beauty. There was a force behind her stare, an unspoken authority pressing against his very being. Slowly, she stepped forward. The hem of her shimmering robes barely touched the ground, flowing around her like liquid light. Rivar swallowed hard. Every instinct told him to run, but there was nowhere to go. Do you understand the honor bestowed upon you? Her voice echoed within his mind, smooth and commanding. Rivar exhaled sharply, forcing himself to stand. His legs still felt weak, but he refused to cower. I was kidnapped. You didn't ask if I wanted to be here. A flicker of something crossed her expression. Amusement? Annoyance? It was impossible to tell. Your presence was necessary. Asking would have been inefficient. Rivar clenched his jaw. Right, of course. How silly of me to expect basic free will. A murmur rippled through the chamber. The figures flanking the throne, the High Council, he assumed, shifted slightly. Their glowing eyes flickered. It was subtle. But Rivar got the distinct impression that no one spoke to Queen like that. And yet, she didn't seem angry. If anything, she looked intrigued. You have spirit, she observed, tilting her head. That will serve you well. Rivar crossed his arms. For what exactly? What do you want from me? At this, she smiled. A real one this time, though it sent a different kind of chill through him. You have been selected to participate in an experiment. The word sent a bolt of dread through his spine. Experiment. No way. He was about to be some kind of lab rat for a race of glowing psychic aliens. Rivar let out a short, disbelieving laugh. You make it sound so simple. Zelara took a step forward, closing the distance between them. It is, she said, her voice softer now. Not the commanding tone of a queen issuing orders, but something else. Something dangerous. Rivar swallowed hard. You want this to work. I do. She was being honest, and that was the terrifying part. This wasn't just about survival or duty anymore. There was something personal in the way she looked at him, as if she had glimpsed his loneliness, his yearning for something more, and recognized it. He needed to get his head straight. Standing abruptly, he put space between them, running a hand through his hair. I still don't get why it has to be me. Out of every species in the universe, why a random guy from Earth? Because you are not random, Zelara said with certainty. Your genetic structure is unique. Your mind is resistant to our psionic influence, yet open to deep connection. You are an anomaly, Rivar, a possibility that has never existed before. That didn't make him feel any better. He let out a breath, turning to face her fully. And what if I don't feel the same way? The question hung in the air. Zelara tilted her head slightly, studying him, as if trying to gauge his sincerity. Then, to his surprise, she smiled, not the cold, calculating kind she had worn before, but something softer. Then I will accept that, she said simply. But I do not believe you will feel nothing. Rivar opened his mouth, ready to argue, but the words caught in his throat. Because the truth was, he did feel something, and that was the real problem. If this worked, he wouldn't just be trapped here. He wouldn't want to leave. Rivar rubbed his face, trying to push away the creeping sense of inevitability pressing down on him. He wasn't ready to admit Zelara was right. Not yet. But the worst part was, deep down, some part of him didn't want to fight this as much as he should. He had spent most of his life feeling like he didn't belong anywhere, like he was always searching for something just out of reach. And now, an alien queen was telling him he was special, that he had a purpose that no one else could fulfill, that he was needed. It was a lot to take in. He shook his head, forcing himself back to reality. Okay, say I agree to this experiment. What exactly does it involve? Zelara watched him for a long moment before gesturing with one hand. The walls shimmered, and suddenly the entire room shifted. The furniture, the walls. Everything seemed to hum with energy, rearranging itself as if responding to her unspoken command. Rivar tensed. Yeah, see, that's the kind of thing you should warn people about before you do it. You must acclimate to our way of existence, she said smoothly. The Zari do not function as your kind does. Our bond is not merely physical. It is a convergence of mind, body, and essence. Rivar narrowed his eyes. And what does that mean exactly? Zelara stepped toward him, and this time he held his ground. It means that if we are truly compatible, you will feel it. Her voice was calm, but there was something beneath it, something charged. Rivar swallowed. Feel what? She raised her hand again. Before he could react, she pressed her palm lightly against his chest. The moment they touched, the world tilted. A flood of sensation crashed into him. Heat, light, something like electricity sparking beneath his skin. But it wasn't pain. It was awareness. Suddenly, he wasn't just standing in a room. He was floating in an endless expanse of stars, weightless, his thoughts no longer entirely his own. He could feel her, not just her presence, but her emotions, her intentions, her very being wrapped around as like a second skin. There was strength, yes, but also curiosity, hope, longing. He gasped, stumbling back, and the connection snapped like a rubber band. The room returned to normal. His heart pounded against his ribs. Zelara remained composed, but there was something in her expression now, something waiting. Rivar gritted his teeth. What the hell was that? Synchronization, she said simply. A glimpse of what we could become. His breathing was uneven. His entire body still buzzed with the remnants of the connection. He had felt her emotions, but worse, he had felt his own. And deep down, beneath all the resistance and disbelief, he couldn't ignore one terrifying truth. He had wanted more. Rivar paced the length of the chamber, his pulse still unsteady. He had felt things he shouldn't have, things he didn't even understand. That connection, that moment of pure synchronicity, it wasn't just some alien trick. It had been real, and that scared him more than anything else. He turned sharply to face Zelara, who remained poised, watching him with an unreadable expression. You can't just throw something like that at me and expect me to go along with it. I expected nothing, she said evenly. I merely showed you the truth. The truth? He let out a sharp laugh. The truth is that I don't belong here. I don't even know if I belong anywhere. But I sure as hell didn't wake up today thinking, hey, maybe I should go marry an alien queen and become king of a species I've never heard of. Zelara tilted her head slightly, considering him. And yet you did not reject a connection. That shut him up. She stepped closer, slow and deliberate. Had your heart truly resisted, the bond would not have formed. Our minds would have remained separate. Rivar clenched his fists. I didn't ask for this. Neither did I, she said, and there was something raw in her voice that caught him off guard. I did not wake expecting to find an answer in you. Rivar of Earth, I did not wish to place the future of my people in the hands of a stranger. And yet, she exhaled slowly. The bond is real, whether we desire it or not. Fate has already begun its course. Rivar's jaw tightened. And if I walk away? There was a pause. Then, for the first time, something flickered in Zelara's gaze. Uncertainty. Then I will let you go. The words felt heavier than they should have. His chest ached, and he hated that it did, hated that some part of him didn't want to hear those words. She continued, her voice quieter now. But know this, our connection is not one-sided. You felt what I did. You know the truth. And that was the worst part, because she was right. Even now, even as he fought against it, he could still feel the lingering warmth of that bond, like an echo in his soul. He knew that if he left, he wouldn't just be leaving this place. He would be leaving something unfinished, something that might haunt him forever.